Brendan Sherwin tweets about PRNGs. Steve, I was should we call them prongs? Maybe prongs. I was hoping you could discuss how a pseudo-random number generator, or PRNG, works, and how a hardware PRNG might be more random than a software PRNG. I think prong. I'm going to call him a prong.
Okay.
How is a hardware prong more random?
No one will know what we're talking about.
I know, it'd be very confusing. How is a hardware prong more random than a software prong? You know what? We should start a campaign. I'm telling you. This is the way to do it.
And if there was more opportunity to say prong.
Why not?
For example, it's too bad that there's no way to pronounce HTTP.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
doesn't really work. Prong, yeah, but unfortunately, it's a low use case.
Yeah. PRNG,
anyway.
though, that's a lot of syllables.
Yeah.
He says, I don't know if a hardware PRNG is more random. However, it seems to be the rule of thumb with the people I've talked with. They don't seem to have answers as to why. So maybe you do. Thank you. Love the show, Brendan. That was a long tweet. Is he using that new 10,000 character tweet capability?
Oh, I'm sure. You wouldn't be. I get books now sent to me.
Oh, Lord. And you thought that was a good idea, huh?
Well, I'll tell you, it beats having a book divided up into 144 characters. Because that has happened also.
Yeah,
and that's really not good. It's like, what? Because I also get, of course, I have noises for everything. So all kinds of, it's like, no breaking loose over here.
And then it goes 1, 2, except it's backwards, isn't it? 443, 442.
Yeah. Not good. So, okay, here's the deal. What is special about a hardware PRNG or prong?
You see?
It is. I agree, Leo. It's catchy.
Yeah.
What's special about a hardware prong?
You can't do it.
No, I can't
do it.
PRNG is it uses something truly random. It could be, in some cases, for example, if this is crazy. Well, okay, for a classic that I loved was that Sun Microsystems used to have cameras pointing at lava lamps, looking at the wax moving around, undulating in the lava lamp, because it was that's a chaotic process. And they would digitize that and use it to maybe not directly generate random numbers, but to seed a software PRNG. There are pure hardware random number generators which use some physical property. That's the key. You can't just use math because, or you have a software pseudo random number generator. So it's actually not the case. You wouldn't say hardware pseudo random number generator. You would say hardware random number generator, and that would be a HRNG, an HRNG. So, for example, there are a number of ways that electronics can be used. If you diodes are known to be noisy. That is, there's actual when a diode is trying to resist current, it only allows current to pass in one way. When you push current in the other way, every so often an electron will wander across the PN junction and cause an event. And so there are ways that you can use a reverse BIOS diode to generate absolutely unpredictable noise. It's called quantum noise because this is quantum phenomena. And that's typically, it needs to be post-processed. For example, it might be mostly ones and zeros and some zeros. So you need to whiten it in order to balance it. And it might, so for example, there's a bias in individuals, but it turns out if you XOR a pair, that automatically removes the BIOS, which is the bias, which is a really cool side effect of XOR in this case. So a software pseudo random number generator, given a known state, always produces a known and predictable all the way out into the future sequence of pseudo random numbers. If you don't know what the internal state is, then and unless you get a large number of its output, it's difficult to reverse engineer its internal state. So what we see now is sort of hybrid designs where real world things, maybe not a reversed BIOS diode junction, but how about the unknowable, unpredictable, precise timing of packets arriving at a network interface, or packets coming over the from a Wi-Fi source, or the number of branches not taken or mispredicted by the CPU. It's completely, technically that's deterministic because it's all algorithmic based, but it basically condenses so many different unknowable factors about the past of the processor since it was booted and everything that's happened to it since, mouse movements and packet arrivals and everything else, even the phasing of the display interrupts coming into the chip. So that all could be used to seed a software-based pseudo-random number generator. The reason is that sometimes these hardware events are low bandwidth. You can't ask the hardware for a huge amount of randomness. It's just not producing it that fast. So what you do is you use a pool concept where over time a pool of true entropy is slowly generated, and then once it's full enough, you start using it, and then you start filling. While you're using that pool, you are filling a new pool again, slowly trickle filling it with hardware event true entropy. Meanwhile, a software algorithm is using the entropy in the pool you've just finished filling. The problem is you don't want to use it forever because, in theory, anybody who knew what the algorithm was and looked at enough output could eventually reverse engineer the state of the pool and from then on predict the future. So way before that much output has been generated, hopefully your secondary pool has now filled up enough, and again you swap pools. So that's a means of having true, effective, sort of constantly reseeded. This process of swapping pools is called seeding the software pseudo-random number generator. And so this is a periodic hardware reseeding of a software pseudo-random number generator. And now you know way more than you ever wanted to about prongs.
Or prangs.
We
didn't consider prangs.
Or harangues.
I think random number generator is actually really
I think maybe we ought to just be clear. Yeah.
And we can leave out the pseudo.
Yeah, because in the case of hardware, it's true random.
Yeah, hardware is random. That's the biggest difference, isn't it? It's not pseudo.
Oh, I forgot hard drive access timing too. Anything you look at with sufficient resolution is generating at least some least significant bits of absolute uncertainty, based on the timing of the request and where, the rotational position of the drive. Boy, hard drives are a great source.
How good is it when they say, okay, move your mouse, wiggle your finger or whatever, those kinds of things?
I don't have that in Squirrel. I don't have that in Squirrel because it always upset me that sort of the user had input. Right. It's like, okay, how long should I do this? And if I don't do it long enough, it turns. Yeah, exactly. And it also seemed sort of more like a pacifier. Like it's very much like McAfee saying that he's using military-grade encryption. Yes, but it's John McAfee. Right. So I don't care whose military's encryption you're using if John McAfee was involved. Similarly, it's like, okay, if I'm in charge of making sure my hard drive encryption is secure by moving my mouse around a lot, that just doesn't feel right to me. And it turns out it's totally unnecessary. If you are operating as I am at the machine level with Squirrel, as I just enumerated a bunch of sources of entropy, and we did that famous podcast a couple years ago, called Harvesting Entropy, where I talked about my design of Squirrel's basically hardware true random number solution.
And that's where we first talked about this, using a diode as a way to generate
As a hardware noise source. Yeah.